Looking good.
So at the beginning of this week, we're just 5 weeks out from the Melbourne Marathon, coming off my biggest ever mileage week of 143 Ks, with the marathon specific session on the Sunday just gone. Alright, so I've decided to alter my training a little bit this week from what I initially had planned. I was initially planning to do a long run with some quality towards the end today, which is a Wednesday, and then Friday do a medium long run, and then Sunday do my specific marathon session. But I just found that the medium long run was a little bit unnecessary, and I've figured out a way to maneuver it so I can get a little bit more quality in today, still achieve the aim of banging up the legs a little bit on the long run tomorrow, and then on Sunday I'll keep it as I was initially intending with my marathon specific workout. I think that way I'll just be able to maintain my anaerobic threshold a little bit, get a little bit more turnover in the legs, and then tomorrow I can back off the pace just a little bit from what I was initially intending, but still get the benefit of increasing my muscular endurance over some hills. So stupidly I had my thumb over the microphone for the remainder of that point, so I'll just finish it off here. Essentially I've had this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that if I stop doing threshold training, I'm going to get worse really quickly. I've made no secret of it that I largely attribute my massive improvement over the last few years to doing lots and lots of threshold training. And to reduce that now, I feel as though I wouldn't be going into Melbourne in the best shape that I possibly could be. The training that I had planned worked really well when I was running 2:49 for the marathon, which is 4 minutes a K. That was probably 20 seconds a K slower than what my threshold was at the time, so I had a pretty decent buffer. I could afford to let that threshold get worse. But now that I'm getting down closer to the 2.5 hour mark, I'm running above my LT1 and getting pretty close to my threshold for marathon pace. So it becomes more and more important that I keep that anaerobic threshold really high so that I do have a decent buffer. Because at the moment, what I'm aiming to do is run maybe 10 or 12 seconds a kilometre slower than my threshold for marathon pace. But if I let that anaerobic threshold come down, I'm going to be getting really close to it in the marathon, and it's just not going to work. I'm going to be running at far too high of an intensity, not going to be able to relax. So I just felt like I needed to change my training a little bit. So just to reiterate, today, sub-threshold session. Tomorrow, steady long run of 32K over some hills. And then Sunday, marathon specific session. I should hit about 144 kilometers for the week, and that's where I'm going to peak. That'll be 4 weeks out at the end of this week, 4 weeks out to Melbourne. Next week, I'll do about 140 Ks, but I've got the Ross Half Marathon on the Sunday next week, and so I won't get quite as many Ks leading into that. I'm not going to taper for it or anything like that, but I'll probably just do just a few less kilometers in that week, just so that I can hit marathon pace in that half marathon workout. And that's how I'm doing it. I've never actually run a race as a training session before, so it's going to be a bit of a challenge for me, I think, just to try and stay disciplined. I know I do think of myself as quite a disciplined runner, but that can all change when you put in that competitive environment. When you've got people blazing past you, it can, I don't know, activate some kind of instinct within you, and your reason, your rationality just goes out the window. Hopefully that won't happen. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it under control, keep the heart rate below threshold for the entirety of the half marathon distance. And if I can do that, then I'll have achieved my goal. Same goes for the 4x5K session I've got this weekend. Last week's marathon specific session went really well. It was pissing down with rain throughout the first half, which kept my body temperature quite low, but it was fairly miserable for the first half. But yeah, heart rate really low throughout that workout. It seemed to just stabilize at about 157, which is 6 beats below my threshold. Again, I tend to think that thresholds, you're not aiming to stay under threshold for the entirety of a marathon. You're not going to do that, but you're trying to keep it under that for as long as possible. And I'd say 25k, if you're running close to 2.5 hours for a marathon, then 25k is probably the point where you can start thinking about pushing on and really driving from home. But you still need to spread out your effort. You don't want to be going from threshold to VO2 max within a kilometre straight after 25k. So yeah, for me it's more about just really measuring that effort, staying below threshold, staying controlled until 25k. So when I'm doing these sessions, I should be under threshold for the entirety of them, because they're only 20, 21 kilometers in volume. So if I can do that, I can be pretty confident in thinking it was marathon effort. So here we go. I've sold out, but here's the thing. I'm only going to do promotions for products that I would actually use myself. If they work well or they make training more enjoyable, then I'm happy to give a product a plug. So with that said, I've always had issues with sinus congestion when running. If you've watched enough of these videos, you might have noticed quite a bit of snot rocketing. And so when HiStrips got in touch and asked me to test out their nasal strips, I was curious to see if that helped. The issue I've had with other nasal strips that I've tried in the past is that once you start to sweat, they tend to peel off. But that doesn't happen with these ones. The adhesive is ridiculously strong. Even when it poured with rain during one of my sessions last week, the strips remain firmly in place. If you've been watching the World Athletics Championships this week, you've probably noticed quite a few athletes wearing them. So do they work? Well, I can say that when wearing the nasal strips, my rate of snot rocketing has definitely reduced, and my nasal passages feel far more clear and open, which obviously makes for a better, more comfortable experience when running. I've only been testing them for 2 weeks, so my sample size is still fairly small, but I have noticed that my heart rate has been a little lower than expected when wearing the strips. You might be wondering how they work. Well, they're a spring-like flexible band that when attached to your nose, broaden the nasal passages, enlarging the airways, which ultimately means more oxygen intake through the nose. According to HiStrips, their nasal strips can increase oxygenation by up to 30%, which not only improves endurance performance, but can also contribute to better sleep, mental acuity, and a stronger immune system. Now, if you head over to HiStrips via the link in the description and use the code JOGGER, you'll get 10% off your purchase. They come in a pack of 30 and in lots of different colours, so if the blue ones that I've been wearing aren't your thing, you've got a selection to choose from. Now back to the video. Okay, so today I'm doing a 32 kilometre run over some hills. It's going to be steady effort. I did sub-threshold yesterday, so I'm a little bit sore. I usually wouldn't do a steady effort the day after a workout like that, but I'm going to have 2 easy days after this before doing another marathon-specific workout on Sunday. So today, I guess you could call it a steady effort. I'll probably back off the pace a fair bit. If I can run 4:45 a kilometre, that'll be absolutely fine. 4:45 over hills is decent effort. It's not going to kill me, but it's definitely not an easy pace once you factor in the hills.
How are you feeling?
Kind of terrible, but I always do when it's an early morning, getting prepared for a marathon session. So today I've got 4x5k at marathon effort, we'll call it that. It's pretty windy out here, so I'm going to stick to marathon heart rate / effort. Try not to get too caught up in the pace. I'll take a 2-minute standing recovery, and I'll basically just be going 5k out on a road, stand for 2 minutes, 5k back, do that twice. Yeah.
What are you going to do for nutrition?
I'll take a gel before I start, a caffeinated gel, and then just take 2 gels during, probably 6.5 and 13 k's in. Yeah, so that'll be that. I'll take a bottle as well. When I get back to the car at halfway, try and drink all of about 500 mils of water with a salt tab in it to try and get all of that down. It is warming up. It's more, I'd say, a little bit more humid. It feels a little bit, I don't know, just muggier than usual. So that's why I've come out here early to try and get it done before it heats up and before the wind picks up as well. But it's already pretty windy. All right. I'm knackered already.
That's how I felt yesterday before my session. Last bit into the wind. How did it go?
Yeah, it was good. I kept the heart rate below threshold. I think I averaged 3:39 a kilometre for the whole thing, so pretty similar to last week. Heart rate was a little bit higher, but yeah, it's much worse conditions today. Just that wind. I think, yeah, first rep was probably pushed a little bit too hard going out into the headwind, but averaged 3:39s. On the way back, 3:38s, and then on the way out again, pushed probably a little bit too hard, but averaged 3:40s, and then the last rep, 3:37s. So I kept it all between 3:37 3:40 a kilometre, which is exactly what I wanted to do, and I kept it below threshold in terms of heart rate. In terms of perceived effort, I'd say the first rep was the hardest, and then the last rep was just a piece of piss because I was just looking at my heart rate, just keeping that down, so I just had to keep backing off, but the pace was already pretty good. So
That's good though, because that headwind coming back along the airport was really
Yeah.
strong. When I came back, I almost lost my hat.
yeah, it was kind of like a cross headwind, and then sometimes it would feel like it was behind you when I was coming along this way. But yeah, it was just swirly, and it was kind of, for the most part on the way back, you had a tailwind all the way, but then when you turned, it was just very unpredictable. So
You at least missed the two emergency vehicles going around the airport road, and I got covered in dust.
yeah,
twice.
that's horrible. That's why I never train down here to do threshold sessions, because you always get that. But for these longer sessions, you kind of have to have a long straight set or a continuous section of road where you don't have to kind of double back on yourself. So I can get 5Ks without having to turn. I can stop, turn around, and then go. But yeah, it's so exposed to the wind down here. But it's all right. That's 4 weeks to go until Melbourne, and yeah, I've not done a bad session yet. Usually you get one or two in the marathon block. I think
It's been a very short block.
yeah, Thursday's long run, that was a bit tough. I think I was just starting to lock up in the hips a little bit, and I didn't feel good towards the end. I probably didn't take on enough water either, so heart rate started to climb a little bit, but I don't really care too much about those long steady runs. It's more about hitting these quality sessions. Yeah, did that today.
Right, time for some lunch.
Yeah.